This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm looking for my lost shaker of salt.
That's Charlie.
Hi.
He doesn't have his glasses on either, so who knows what you're going to get. So put your feet up, jump on your inversion table, relax, and thank you for spending the next hour with us as we talk about food, of course.
Yeah.
In the second half, I'm going to talk about HIV/AIDS and share with you an interview with Tom Hartman about the Names Project. And in our third half, we're going to be performing a scene from Torch Song Trilogy in our ongoing segment of Funeral Theater, where we put the fun in funeral.
Yes. Now, this week, we are celebrating or recognizing World AIDS Day. This was first recognized in 1988. World AIDS Day falls on December 1st each year. World AIDS Day is dedicated to spreading awareness of the AIDS pandemic spread by the spread of HIV infection and to mourn those who have died of the disease. An estimated 40 million people worldwide have died of AIDS since 1981. And an estimated 37 million are living with HIV, making it one of the most important global public health issues in recorded history. Despite recent improvements in treatment, the AIDS epidemic still claims an estimated 2 million lives each year, of which more than 250,000 are children.
And so for those living with HIV/AIDS, we dedicate the show to you, and we recognize the ongoing nature of this disease. We know that in some parts of the world it's better than in other parts.
Right.
And we just want you to know that we share that struggle and our hearts are with you.
Absolutely, yes.
So, not to change the subject, but I was reading about jambalaya. And,
Yes, no one can accuse you of changing the subject. Oh, that's funny.
Well, I'm almost always thinking about food, so it's really not a change of subject if you really, kind of look at it that way.
Okay.
But if you Google jambalaya, it'll say jambalaya for funerals. I mean, it's a choice. So I read that funerals in New Orleans serve jambalaya. So what is jambalaya, Charlie? Because you know everything, because you live in New York.
Huh? I mean, yes, of course. Well, okay, so according to, according to the dictionary, listen, jambalaya is rice cooked usually with ham, sausage, chicken, shrimp, or oysters, and seasoned with herbs, or herbs, depending what part of the country you live in. So according to Southern Living magazine, this statement about, what's in the jambalaya is about as close as you'll get to having people agree on what jambalaya really is. Oh, finally, something everyone can agree with in this country.
Right.
Opinions differ on, you ain't kidding that opinions are differing. Opinions differ on how to cook a proper jambalaya, just as they differ on how to cook a gumbo or whether you should put sugar in your cornbread or whether you should shake or stir your martini. And ladies and gentlemen, let's get this very clear. It should be stirred, not shaken. You never want to bruise that gin. Thank you very much.
How can you bruise gin? What is this baloney?
Well, think about it. Gin is the type of berry. You take a berry in a shaker and you shake that bad boy up and it just breaks apart all those little cells. And it was Somerset Maugham, and I don't remember how he put it, but he's talked about this. Something about you stir it so that you don't bruise the gin. Something to that effect.
Yeah, so the jambalaya.
Yeah. What about it? I was talking about
so it's rice.
Yes, that's right.
It's rice and oysters.
Right. So the jambalaya, and remember, stirred, not shaken. You don't want to bruise the gin. Okay, now I remember where we're at. So what everyone does agree on, because there's so few things, is that so this jambalaya recipe, which I've already forgotten what I said, but the jambalaya recipe, which is ready
that we're posting.
Wait,
because
actually, yes, that's true. There we are.
We're so good.
Yes, we are
keeping you fed during this doggone pandemic.
Yes.
Dagnabbit anyway.
Dagnabbit Luke. Walter Brennan, the real McCoys. Dagnabbit Luke. Do you know that? What?
You and I are like the only ones who know this crap.
Somebody out there must know it. Walter.
Well, they should write to us and say
Walter Brennan knows
we
it.
get it.
Walter Brennan knows, and I believe he holds the record for the most number of Oscar wins. 4 of them.
No.
Yeah.
Really?
Look at all this old stuff before the real McCoy. He's not just Grandpa McCoy. He's very talented and great character actor. Oh, yeah.
He'll always be Grandpa McCoy in my heart.
Yes. Well,
Dagnabbit.
Dagnabbit Luke. Yes. Now, why don't we just tell everybody to jump to the recipe and
listen, everybody, go get a martini.
Yeah.
We'll catch up with you in a little bit.
Yeah, stirred, not shaken. And of course, you have your choice of olives or lemon twist. Of course, traditionally, there was also the pearl onion, which people started with 100 years ago, or whenever it came about. Oh, yes, jambalaya. So there's the recipe, which if you haven't been taking notes, and if you haven't, that's smart on your part, we will have the recipe for you so you can pick up that recipe online. So with all that stuff together, you would fry up some flavorful andouille sausage. Marianne, am I pronouncing that correctly? Andouille or andouille?
I have
andouille.
I have no idea.
Andouille.
But I'll go with it.
Viva Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. Okay. So andouille sausage. No, it can't be right. Andouille. Okay, so we look forward. We look forward to your feedback and letters about this episode.
How obnoxious we are today.
Yeah, this is not how you're supposed to do it. Andouille. Andouille. That's Spanish. Andouille. All right, fine. The sausage. To start the dish off right, followed by the aromatic trinity of onion, celery, and pepper. So you fry up some of the andouille sausage, and then followed by, as I mentioned, the aromatic trinity of onion, celery, and pepper. This recipe uses shredded cooked chicken, but feel free to substitute some leftover Thanksgiving turkey. I've never heard of it with turkey, but sure, why not? It's poultry. I'm game.
Yeah, it's a white meat.
Game, get it? Game. No? Okay, fine.
Oh, that's bad.
Instead, so if you are having company over the holidays, take some of the meal planning stress off your shoulders. Order out. Oh, that's not what it says here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Take some of the meal planning stress off your shoulders. Simply make a pan of this ahead and freeze. Well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. Reheat it and serve it with a warm loaf of crusty bread for a delicious and hearty meal. And with that thought in mind,
I'd be happy with just the bread.
You know, if it's warm bread,
Sorry.
even if it's not homemade bread, but it's like warmed with the butter, not melted, but cold, like slightly cold. Yeah, there we are. That's a meal in and of itself. Yes.
You know, I've started baking bread, and I made bread the other day, and came out of the oven, waited 30 minutes, sliced a slice. Dave's standing there. I said, "Do you want a slice of bread?" He said, "The one you just made." I said, "No, I've got like Wonder Bread right here in the fridge. I can just, get that out for you." Like, what the heck do you think I'm talking about? Yes, the bread I just made.
Well, I thought it was very polite of him to have asked first.
Ben.
Okay.
So anyway.
So, in case you missed any of that recipe, and you know what, you should really be paying closer attention. Please go to everyonedies.org. That's dies.org, and send us your own recipes to share with others. Also, we appreciate your questions and anything else you want to tell us. Well, within reason. You can email us at...
No, I want to hear it all.
All?
I don't care if it's within reason or not. I want to hear it all.
Okay, folks, let your hair down. Hair down. let your hair down. You can also email us at mail@everyonedies.org. Dies.org. Also, please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies. This is completely spelled out, no number. So Everyone Dies. And please remember to rate and review this podcast. Molly, our Twitter queen dynamite with a laser beam guaranteed to blow your mind. Does she know this about herself?
No.
Okay. Is hoping that you will follow us on Twitter and repost her tweets so we will stop singing about her. No, we're not going to stop singing about her, but give us a shout out.
Yeah.
Marianne, what it is in our second half?
So, Charles, I am going to chat a bit about HIV/AIDS. And, since it's AIDS Awareness Day, and it only makes sense that we should have a little chat about that. So, sit down. There'll be a test at the end, Charles. I expect you to pay full attention.
Oh, I hate spot quizzes.
HIV, which is the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, is a virus that attacks the body immune system. If the HIV is not treated, it can lead to AIDS, which is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So HIV is the first part of it. Mm-hmm. If that part's not treated, then it can progress to AIDS. So I'd like our audience and you and everybody else to, kind of remember that those are two different things. So the virus goes back as far as the 1800s. Oh. It's old. Over decades, HIV slowly spread across Africa and later into other parts of the world. We know that the virus has existed in the United States since at least the mid-1970s. So, as I was reading around, they were talking about how it had gone from animal to human, just like the coronavirus, and the mode of transmission is one of the variables that's different between the two, among other things, but that's one of them. So there are a couple of stages. There's 3 stages. The first stage is acute HIV infection. And acute HIV infection, people have a large amount of HIV in the blood, and they are very contagious when they have that. Some people will experience flu-like syndromes, and this is the body's natural response to an infection. You get an infection, your body says, I don't want this, I'm going to try to get rid of it, and it's going to heat you up and try to kill it off.
This is just true for any virus in general, right? When the body says, I don't want this inside of me. But it's also
true.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
It's also true for HIV.
Right.
Some people may not feel sick right away or even at all. So just like, again, with coronavirus, some people are totally asymptomatic. But if you have flu-like symptoms and you think that you might have been exposed to HIV, you want to make sure you go get medical care and go get diagnosed. Now, there is a specific test, which, in the early part of our lives, Charlie, they didn't have. There's an antigen antibody test or a nucleic acid test, NATs, which can diagnose an acute infection. So let's say, you're a nurse and you're caring for somebody and you've given them an injection and then that needle, you didn't put the cap on correctly or whatever you were doing and you got stuck. And you say to yourself, oh, this is a problem. And you find out that patient's HIV positive or has AIDS. Or you don't even really know, but maybe they have some of the risky lifestyles. You can go and you can get tested so that you will know if you have those antibodies. Now, stage 2 is a chronic HIV infection. This stage is also called asymptomatic HIV infection or clinical latency. What that means is that the HIV is still active, but it's reproducing at a very low level. People may not have symptoms or get sick during this phase either. If they don't take HIV medicine, this period may last a decade or longer, but for some people, it'll progress faster. And that's like one of the variables. I don't want to keep comparing it to corona, but I think for people listening, they kind of can see the pattern there,
the parallel,
is that some people, will get the virus, get coronavirus, and get very sick and die very quickly. And that was true of HIV infection also. Now, when they're in stage 2, in that chronic HIV infection phase, they can still transmit the HIV. At the end of this phase, the amount of HIV in the blood is called the viral load. So the amount of HIV in the blood, the viral load, goes up, and the CD4 cell count goes down. So you don't need to remember that. I'm not going to ask you to write an essay about that. But you will hear people talk about, well, my viral load is really high, or my CD4 cell count is really low.
But
that's what they're talking about.
But will it be on the quiz?
It will be,
all right,
yes.
Sorry.
The person might have symptoms as the viral level increases in the body, and the person moves on to stage 3. People who take HIV medicine as prescribed may never move into stage 3. Now, when we were young, in the 70s and 80s, there weren't the medicines to stop people from going on from the chronic HIV infection phase to AIDS. There was no stop there. But it was, wise of the scientists to say, okay, you've got one thing, and then you go to the next thing. Let's find something that keeps you from moving to the next thing, which is the So you can then live with chronic HIV, and the medicine is meant to keep you from transitioning or moving into the AIDS. So stage 3 is the AIDS phase, the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, AIDS. Now, this is the most severe phase of the HIV infection. People with AIDS have such badly damaged immune systems that they get an increased number of severe illnesses, including opportunistic infections. Now, an opportunistic infection is, think of it as a predator. Just when your defenses are low, along comes a cold, or along comes pneumonia, or along comes a yeast infection. And you don't have the immunity to fight it off, and it just takes you over. Right. And so it can be things like thrush, where you get the fuzzy tongue, or chronic yeast, or I don't know if you knew this. Did you know this, that in the let me see, when was it? Early. Let me see. Yeah. On 2005 to 2011, 12, I traveled to Russia a lot. Did you know about that?
Yeah.
And I was teaching there to infectious disease doctors. Now, the people who in Russia, in the Russian Federation, the people who treat people with HIV/AIDS are the infectious disease doctors. And there was an NGO who was sponsoring me and other people to come and teach about palliative care. Because the way the system is that in the Russian Federation at that time, the mid 2005 to 2012 or so is when I was going, they would have hospitals. So I would go teach at the AIDS Hospital number 1 in St. Petersburg. And that whole hospital was full of people with AIDS. And I would go, go up and talk to patients, and I saw things, Charlie, that I've never seen here in the United States, because these were people who were untreated AIDS. Now, probably in the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic in the United States, that's what you saw. But I wasn't working with people then with HIV/AIDS, and so I didn't see this. But these were yeast infections that just had taken over their bodies. It was really, really sad and really, really hard to see these men in these conditions. But at the time, there weren't enough medications or anything to treat the number of people who had this disease. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay. People who receive an AIDS diagnosis when their CD4 cell count drops, or if they develop certain opportunistic infections. So that's how they make that determination that you've gone from having HIV to having AIDS. People with AIDS can have a very high viral load and can also be very infectious. Without treatment, people with AIDS typically survive about 3 years. Now, using data from 2016, data takes a while to be crunched and to get out. So the latest data I could find was from 2016. It was estimated that 1.1 million people have HIV. 86% had been diagnosed. So just let that sit with you for a while. 86% were diagnosed. So what's that? 14% didn't know. Yeah. 64% received care. So of the 86% that were diagnosed, 64% received care. 49% of those 64% continued their treatment, resulting in 53% who were virally suppressed. So do you see the problem with that?
Yeah. It's not like 100% clear in my head, but I get the gist of what you're saying. Yeah.
So not everybody. So let me break it down in my own magical way. So okay. Not everybody who has HIV knows it. Of those who know it, not everyone receives care. Of those who start care, not everybody finishes care. And so of the 86% that are diagnosed, a resulting 53% end up to be virally suppressed.
Jeez. Okay.
So HIV and AIDS remains a persistent problem in the United States and countries around the world. With great progress, though great progress is made in preventing and treating HIV, there's still a lot to do. So in 2018, almost 40,000 people received an HIV diagnosis in the United States, and the annual number of new diagnoses have decreased about 7% between 2014 and 2018. So we've had a 7% decrease in HIV infections between 2014 and 2018.
That's it?
An estimated 1.2 million people in the United States have had HIV at the end of 2018, the most recent year for which we have information. Of those people, about 14%, or 1 in 7, did not know that they had HIV. So those of you who are, still kind of dating, going out, you meet somebody, you like them, one thing leads to another, and you say to yourself, well, he seems like such a kind of, nice person. I'm sure that he doesn't go out with a lot of people, or she doesn't look like she really sleeps around. Like, how could you tell that, that you're looking at it? But anyway, you say, it's all right, I'll just do it. Well, keep in mind that 1 in 7 people don't know that they have HIV. I would say that you really need to have strict condom rules. Mm-hmm. And if you're in a long-term relationship, then both of you go get tested. If you're both negative, then you can,
go to town,
pull off those condoms, and as long as you're going to remain monogamous. If that's not part of the deal, then you keep it wrapped. Keep it wrapped. So in 2018, gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men accounted for 69% of all new HIV diagnoses in the United States. In 2018, heterosexuals made up 24% of all HIV diagnoses.
Wow.
24%.
24? Jeez.
7%, and that's just in the United States, 7% were IV drug users, and 4% were both men having sex with men and IV drug users. So, it's, and here's the thing. So we know, yes, you wear a condom for every sexual act, including oral sex. But people, especially young people, what?
Why oral sex? Why including oral sex?
Because it transfers in bodily fluids.
Uh-huh.
So you have bodily fluids in your penis.
Right.
You have bodily fluids in your anus. You have body fluids in your mouth, in your nose. Don't have sex in your nose. And
wow. Okay.
And that's why you have to pay attention to that. Also, there's sort of a trend in younger people who, especially young girls, who will say, I want to be a virgin when I get married, so I'm only going to have oral sex, or I'm only going to have anal sex. Well, they account for part of that 24%
Sure.
HIV diagnosis because while you may be a virgin, at least vaginally, you're not a virgin in any of the other orifices. And so, therefore, you'll pass that on.
Jeez. All right.
All right. So if we look at HIV diagnosis by race and ethnicity, we see that Black, African American, are most affected by HIV. In 2018, adult and adolescent African Americans accounted for 42% of all new HIV diagnoses. Additionally, Hispanics, Latinos are also strongly affected, and they account for 27% of all new diagnoses. Today, there are more tools than ever that are available to prevent HIV. You can use strategies such as abstinence, which means that you don't have sex. You just pretend like you're married, but that would be unfair. So, abstinence, not having sex, never sharing needles, using condoms the right way every time you have sex. Now, condoms the right way. What does that mean, Charles? That means that you don't, I'm not even going to let you answer. That means that when you take that condom out of the package, you do not unroll it unless you're unrolling it onto a penis. Right. So you don't unroll it and then say, uh-oh, how am I going to get this on? And then get frustrated and then just not use it. So you put it on the head of the penis. And what you want to do is you want to kind of pinch the end of it, hold it, because you don't want it to be so tight that it could break. So pinch the end of it and then, the end of the condom, not the penis. So you want the end of the condom to have a loose reservoir there. I wish you could all see Charlie's face as I'm explaining this to you.
I'm taking notes. No, I'm very familiar with this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So pinch the end of the condom, roll it down on.
Yeah.
Do what you're going to do. Here's the thing. When your partner, the person, whoever it is who's wearing that condom, before they pull out of you, they need to know, and maybe you need to remind them, hold on to that condom. Because if they don't hold on to it as the penis shrinks, that condom can stay in you. It can spill all of its...
all that juice,
all that life juice and transmit.
Voila.
So your partner needs to hold on to that end of that, the part that's closest to their body, hold on to that as they're pulling out. There are also female condoms that go up into the female. And the purpose for that, Charlie's, is, just like with oral sex, is that so that there's not the transmission orally. So you can also take advantage of HIV prevention medicines such as pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEPs, and post-exposure prophylaxis, PEPs. If you have HIV, there are many options you can take to prevent transmitting HIV to others. Now, one of the big issues with HIV is the stigma. There's negative attitudes and beliefs about people who have HIV. It's a prejudice that comes with stigmatizing people, men who have having sex with men, IV drug users, believing that only certain people can get HIV.
Exactly, right.
Making moral judgments about people who take steps to prevent HIV, feeling that people deserve to get HIV because of the choices that they make in their lives.
Lifestyle choices, and yeah.
So like when I was in Russia, I was teaching pain management for the HIV/AIDS patients. And one of the infectious disease doctors says they're getting what they deserve.
Ooh.
And they would call them positives, the positives.
Oh, the positive. Okay. All right.
Which is, derogatory.
Yeah.
Don't do that. And the fact that they had that disease, they very much, they got what they deserved. If they didn't want that, then they, should have, quote unquote, behaved themselves. So there are major problems all across the world with discrimination. There's health officials who are refusing to take care of people. There's refusing to have contact with somebody with HIV. Mm-hmm. One of the exercises that I was doing, I went to Russia a lot for those few years, and I was doing a communications exercise. And I said to the planner, I said, would it be okay if we invited somebody from the hospital, one of the men who had AIDS, to come so we could have this conversation? And she looked at me and she said, I can ask. And then I guess they agreed, and they brought down this man. Mm-hmm. And I said, I had an interpreter, of course, because the only thing I speak in Russian is like Nostrovia. And
not vodka or caviar?
Well, right. I just have to point because my dish is empty, so they know that one. Okay. But so this guy comes in, and I said, ask him if he'd like some tea. And she looks at me and looks at him and says, ask him if he wants some tea. And so I get him some tea. And I said, ooh, want some cookies? Because they at conferences all over the world, they're always feeding you. You want some cookies? So I went, and then I went and sat next to him. And they were like, there was a uniform gasp in the room.
Really?
Because I was sitting next to him. I was talking to him.
I remember that stuff.
I had fed him.
Right.
And they were appalled. Now, you can talk to somebody who has AIDS and not get AIDS.
Right. But
it's a known fact.
Yeah. But
it's a known fact.
I remember that.
You can do that.
Yep. Yeah.
So, think about, it's like anything else. It's like, think about the facts. Think about the science. You're not going to get HIV from the toilet seat. Unless you're doing something really funky with the toilet seat, and so it's like that.
And even then, wait a minute. All joking aside for a moment, no. Even if you're doing it would have really no.
There would have to be a long list of events that would have to happen before you started messing with that toilet seat in order for that to happen. So don't do that. The other part of stigma is not only the discrimination from one person to another, but also the stigma and discrimination and emotional well-being of the people who are living with HIV. They will often internalize the stigma, begin to have a negative self-image. They feel discriminated and judged against, and feel worse about themselves. That stigma can lead to feelings of shame, fear of disclosure, isolation, despair. Families who abandon the people in their family because they have HIV/AIDS, or even if they didn't have HIV/AIDS because they were gay or lesbian.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this hasn't stopped. And it still goes on. And I know I sound impassioned, but it's just so wrong on so many levels. And there's even groups. There's a mother's group of, I forget what it's called, but something like Needing a Hug or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's women who, their other people's sons and daughters who've been abandoned by their own parents, will mother and hug you, like as a mother would,
right? Because
your own mother won't. And as a mom, I just can't even begin to imagine what my girls could do that would make me not hug them. So there's that. In terms of death, in the United States, no less than 675,000 Americans have died since the first cases were diagnosed back in 1981. 675,000. And so that's from 81, 40 years, right?
Yeah.
We're the coronavirus in 8 months is really whacking along there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now it's about 20,000 deaths a year, and that's a significant decrease from the over 40,000 deaths a year that were reported at the height of the epidemic in 1995. So contributing to declines was really a concerted effort by United Nations AIDS to implement a 90-90-90 initiative where they had this goal that they wanted met by 2030. And it was that 90% of people with HIV will be diagnosed. So 90% of people who have HIV will know it. They're diagnosed. Then 90% of those who are diagnosed will be placed on antiretroviral therapy. And then 90% of those on therapy will achieve an undetectable viral load. Because remember the numbers at the very, very beginning? How it was only like 54% who had, okay, because they don't stay with it. That's where this 90-90-90 comes from.
Oh,
is identifying the person, making sure they get the drug, and making sure that they stick with the therapy to achieve an undetectable viral load. The underpinnings of this strategy is evidence that achieving an undetectable viral load reduces a person's risk of infecting others to 0%.
Damn, nice.
So, yes, you get an undetectable viral load, you're not going to infect people. Still, there's challenges. Chief among them are the high infection rate among women, 15 to 24, in many African countries. More HIV testing among younger Africans remains low, while AIDS-related deaths are disproportionately high compared to other age groups. In Russia and Central Asia, where HIV infection rates are on the rise, injecting drugs rather than sexual intercourse has become the major mode of HIV transmission. So, in fact, IV drug use. Yes, for dirty needles.
Okay. Yeah.
So then, that begs the question, well, what about needles exchange? What about, if they're not willing to do that, give people bottles of Clorox to disinfect their needles? Like, that can be addressed, but you will hear the argument that, well, why should we encourage their drug use by giving them clean needles? If they're going to have the risk of getting HIV, maybe they'll just stop the drugs. Well, if people could just stop the drugs, I would think that maybe perhaps they would. It's not such a simple question, answer there.
Yeah.
The discrimination of injecting drug users in the LGBT people, coupled with the lack of HIV-specific care and substance abuse treatment, are likely to fuel infection rates and mortality rates in those regions in the coming year. So it's not going to go away unless there's active approaches to help address the problem.
Yeah, just being proactive. I mean, what we always talk about, being preparation, proactive. Absolutely, yeah. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you didn't at all. That was great. So what I've got now for you, Charlie, is an interview that I did with Tom Hartman. And Tom Hartman and I went to the same high school back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's talking about, in our interview, he's going to talk to us about the NAMES project, which way back, we used to call it the AIDS Quilt Project.
The AIDS Quilt, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so now it's called the NAMES AIDS Memorial Quilt Project. So, Tom Hartman.
So I'm here today with my friend Tom, who I went to high school with, and he has had a couple of volunteer experiences with the NAMES project. So I invited him to talk with us a little bit about what that is. So welcome, Tom. How are you?
Good. Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thanks for telling us. So what is this? What is the NAMES Project?
The NAMES Project, okay. That is the AIDS Memorial Quilt. And it gets a lot of attention. I mean, do people know about World AIDS Day?
Yes, because I just told them.
You just told them, okay. All right, that's why it's like why we're talking about this this morning.
Right.
The NAMES Project is the AIDS Memorial Quilt, and it got started out in San Francisco in 1985, which is about the same time that the World Health Organization declared December 1st as World AIDS Day. And what it is people, as a memorial to somebody they've lost, can create a piece of a quilt. It's, if I remember right, it's like 3 feet by 6 feet, but don't quote me on that. So you can create that.
It's a very specific size that they want, right? I remember.
A very specific size, because then that panel that you create is quilted into a larger piece of canvas that holds, if I remember, like 6 or 10 people in each panel. Okay, so there we go with that. Oh, what do you want to talk about next? I have usually, you can't see the entire quilt anymore in person. You can go on the internet and see every panel that's a part of the quilt. But twice I have volunteered on laying the quilt, a display of the quilt out. And the last time I did this, it was one of the last times that the whole thing was able to be laid out. And they did it inside Chicago. And it took up the entire convention center.
Oh, gosh.
Yes. So, what? Where do we go? Help me here.
I had read somewhere that it would take up like 4 football fields or something now. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yes, I would assume so. I know it can't be displayed in one piece anymore, and hasn't been for years. There's something like 125,000 people.
Yeah,
panels in there.
Are people still adding panels?
Yes, you can add a panel. You know, if you've lost someone, you can add a panel whenever you want. You know, it's
it's only for people who've died from HIV/AIDS, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, I have not. I lost my second partner in 2003, and I started later that year and in 2004 to make one of those, and it just got too overwhelming for me. But if I wanted to go...
The sewing or the emotional part of it?
The emotional stuff. Because basically what I was planning to do is a panel. He played blackjack, and we had a blackjack panel because we'd practice in weeks leading up to trips to Vegas. And so he had this felt that had the blackjack table laid out, and I was gluing things onto it, and it just got overwhelming at that point. But if I wanted today to go and make one for him, they would accept it.
Okay. All right. And people can go. We can post the link on our website for people who want to go and find out like where to send a panel and
where to send,
the dimensions and all of that, right? So we can just we'll let people know how to do that.
It lets me, and you're also able, if you are, you work in a hospital or public health department or a college, and you want to mark World AIDS Day, you can request 1, 2, 6, 7, 10 panels.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they will send it to you. They will work it out that they'll send it to you along with the requirements for how it must be displayed.
And you were telling me that when you volunteered, that they had like people in white who would be available.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Okay. A huge display that's like, you actually invite like the quilt people to come, and it's displayed for several days. There is a ceremony and procedures for the display. Each panel is brought out one by one, and somebody is reading the names on that panel as it is unfolded and placed. Each panel, while they're placed close together, each panel has like 360-degree access, so that people can walk through it. And when the Names Project does a big display, they have people, volunteers who are trained to, you dress in white. You usually have an armband or a T-shirt that identifies you as a volunteer. You're given a huge supply of Kleenex, and you're there for people as needed. It's like, you don't go up and start anything with anybody. But like if you see somebody who's like crying, yes, you go and offer them a Kleenex, a touch, and then if they want, you're also there to like lend a shoulder to cry on or hear their story. It's I guess what going to see this as an observer. It's an incredibly emotional experience. And volunteering, it is an incredibly emotional experience, but you hold yourself at a distance because it's not about you. It's about the people that need to come to this and helping them. And creating community. One of the things that is about the AIDS epidemic that's very different from this coronavirus is, the worst thing you could do is go to a funeral or a memorial service, right?
Well, right?
Yes, especially something that's indoors. You gotta stay. There's no hugging. Go to a funeral. Last year, everybody would be hugging and holding hands, and you can't do that.
Having that human connection in that time of loss, which we're not allowed, or at least shouldn't be doing with the virus.
Yeah. And it's like, I keep wondering how our society is going to start to deal with this massive loss. And it's like, as World AIDS Day comes around this year, that's what it means to me this year. It's like, the HIV/AIDS community has learned something here about dealing with loss, dealing with, being on our own. We're not expecting government help, not getting government help. that this year, World AIDS Day for me is about like what we've learned and how now we can help our wider society, our wider culture.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm so pleased that you took the time from your schedule to let our listeners know about the Names Project. And what I'll do, because we're doing the show for World AIDS Day, is that we will post links. And if any of the listeners want to help Tom with his quilts, are you still wanting to do it, Tom?
Pardon? Oh, you know what? Since I knew I was going to be on your show, I've been thinking about that, and it's like, in some ways, I don't want to drag those feelings up again. They've been examined. They've kind of been put away now for a good decade. I'm kind of happy with like leaving it that way.
Okay.
Now that might change, 5 years down the line, but as of today, it's like, to start to sit down and try and make something that expresses not only Chris as he would have wanted to be remembered, but the Chris I remember.
I can see that. But we have, I'm sure a lot of talented listeners. So if at some point you change your mind about that, you just let us know, and we'll reach out. So,
and
Tom,
I believe.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I believe that there's also a place on that AIDSmemorial.org that. If you've got the sewing skills, they'll connect you with somebody who needs one. There are huge volunteer opportunities there.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. See, here I thought I was inventing an idea. Well, Tom, happy, if it's possible that you say happy World AIDS Day, I will say that to you, and thank you for your volunteering and the work that you've done with HIV/AIDS. And we appreciate you talking to us. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for bringing this to the attention of your listeners.
Thanks. You take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
So now we've reached the third half of our show. Harvey Fierstein wrote a play called Torch Song Trilogy, made into a film. Not only Torch Song Trilogy, but Harvey's written Hairspray, The Birdcage, most recently Kinky Boots from a few years ago. So for tonight, we will touch on the Torch Song Trilogy from 1979. This is a collection of 3 plays written, like I said, in 1979, and it has 3 acts: International Stud, Fugue in a Nursery, and Widows and Children First.
Do you know what the International Stud is in reference to?
I don't want to. Oh, wait a minute. What is it in reference to? What?
You don't know? Do you know?
No, I really don't know. What?
Oh, it's a bar in New York.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
That used to have a back room for
what?
Sex. For sex.
Mon Dieu, in New York? No, I find that hard, especially in the 70s. No, I find that hard to believe. Okay.
Look it up.
All right. Oh, yes, sorry. So with the Torch Song Trilogy, it has 3 acts. Act 1, International Stud. 2, Fugue in a Nursery, and Act 3, Widows and Children First. So the story centers around Arnold Beckhoff, a Jewish homosexual drag queen and torch singer who lives in New York City in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Our scene is from the third act, which takes place several years later. Arnold is a single father raising gay teenager David. It is revealed that just before receiving David from the state, Alan, Arnold's partner, was a victim of a violent hate crime, resulting in his death and leaving Arnold to raise a child on his own. This act revolves around Arnold's struggle to move on following Alan's death, as he is forced to deal with his mother's, Ma, intolerance and disrespect when she visits from Florida.
Wait. Are you trying to compare my marriage with you and Alan? Your father and I were married for 35 years, had 2 children, and a wonderful life together. You have the nerve to compare yourself to that?
That's not what I mean. I'm talking about loss.
Oh, what loss have you have? You fooled around with some boy. Where do you come to compare that to a marriage of 35 years?
You think it doesn't?
Come on, Arnold. You think you're talking to one of your pals?
Ma, I lost someone that I loved very much.
So you felt bad. Maybe you cried a little. But what do you know about what I went through? 35 years I lived with that man. He got sick. I brought him to the hospital. And you know what they gave me back? I gave them a man. They gave me a paper bag with his watch, wallet, and wedding ring. How could you possibly know what that felt like? It took me 2 months until I could sleep in our bed alone. A year to learn to say I instead of we. And you're going to tell me you were widowing? How dare you?
Oh, you're right, Ma. How dare I? I couldn't possibly know how it feels to pack someone's clothes in plastic bags and watch the garbage pickers carry them away. What it feels like to forget and set his place at the table. Oh, how about the food that rots in a refrigerator because you forgot how to shop for one? Yeah, how dare I? And with that.
And scene. And I think that that's a really good scene in terms of, like, Ma understands her own loss and grief, but has no empathy in terms of thinking that her son's relationship with his partner had the same elements and the same love and the same loss.
Yeah, it's strictly based on sexuality. And then it just also, too, with her character, she's just not that warm, touchy-feely type anyway. But I think, here especially, just because, you're a man with a man. I was a man with a woman, or a woman with a man. It doesn't compare exactly. That's where she's coming from.
Right.
Yeah. But pain and grief are pain and grief. It's universal.
It's exactly right. And death is death. And to minimize it that way, is just, it's just so sad and leads to a lot of broken, hurt people.
And also, too, what we spoke about recently in a podcast about the way people just don't deal with death. And it's possible.
Don't deal with what?
Death. So it's possible, even though she's complaining about, well, I did this, she is still not, she's just angry and not, making any effort to move forward. And it's just easier to criticize someone else. So there's always a lot of factors involved. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's so multi-layered and goes around in circles and upside down and messes with you forever.
Yep, it does. And with that, folks, thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, Molly. Oh, Molly,
she's a killer queen. Dynamite with a laser beam, guaranteed.
What team did O'Malley used to own?
Huh?
Wait a minute, it was Chicago, right? O'Malley, owner of the Dodgers. Jeez,
White Sox. Chicago was White Sox.
Right?
It
was the White. It was the Chicago, right? I think so. And I don't remember his first name. I don't know.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Humbug. Oh, wait a minute. That's Christmas. So,
Save that.
So Mally, our Twitter correspondent, and our friends, family, and our loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
And I'm Marianne Matzo. And we look forward to talking with you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.